why are we teaching math? It's not just about right answers. Right answers are very important, but it's so much deeper than that now. I mean, it always was, but now it's like blatantly obvious how different it is. And so there's just a lot of tiny little steps that have to be taken. I'm just going to get on a clothespin. I'm going to see how this works. Or I'm just going to grab the cubes and be like, do you even know what 15 divided by 3 means? What am I doing to this child by trying to teach them something that they don't even know what division means? You have to pause and ask yourself those questions. And those are really hard questions. And you have to be willing to hear an answer or come across an answer that makes you uncomfortable. And that's when you are going to do great things.
Welcome to Blue Glasses Math. In this podcast, we will explore how our self-perception as math teachers and learners influences our approach to life. Whether you identify as a math enthusiast or not, this podcast is for you. Are you a teacher, a parent, a school administrator, or a student? Join me as we shift our perspective on what it means to be a math person. Let's take a look. Hey, Courtney.
Hey.
It's so good to see you today.
It's good to see you.
Blue Glasses Math. And we met briefly at NCTM and CSM, like that night in between. And I knew we had it's actually kind of funny because you and I had been chattering the week before on, I don't know what platform, like LinkedIn or something. And then I saw you at the conference and it was sort of like, we kind of, and then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm not wearing my glasses.
It felt so bad. And when it clicked, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm totally being that person that doesn't recognize someone without their glasses on.
No,
but it all worked out.
It all worked out. And I'll be honest with you, Chris Childs had the same response. And he was, and I'm like, it's Pam Brett. You were on my podcast. He's like, but you're not wearing your glasses. He's like, that's your whole brand. He's like, you have to be on brand, girl. And I'm like, oh gosh. I guess so. But they're readers. So I don't wear them when I'm walking around because they're readers. So now I have a whole battery of the empty one, or well, not empty, but they're just 0% correction.
So now you can wear them and people know who you are.
Yes. It's so ridiculous. Oh man,
that's pretty funny.
I've painted myself into a corner with that one.
They look good though. It's a good look. I wore my blue sweatshirt in honor of.
I see. I see. And your glasses are kind of blue.
They're a little tinted blue, but they're not nearly as cool as yours. So.
Well, shout out to Peepers. I'm so
really.
I need them to be my sponsor.
Yeah, really.
Because I need them to keep making the glasses because right now they're they don't make them anymore. So I'm in a panic. All right. So anyway, enough about the blue glasses, but I just thought it was funny how we met and how it was sort of this awkward moment. But but we're here now.
Here we are.
So thank you so much for being here. And so I think I start every episode by asking the question, tell me your math story. And it's not I want to hear your every single moment of, in third grade this or whatever, but what are the moments that really shaped how you see math today? And maybe the people, the situations, and so let's hear it.
Well, I mean, I for sure the person, my original colleague, math colleague and mentor is my husband, Ryan Flessner. And, I tell this story a lot, how when we were dating, we were driving down the road and the clock said, I don't remember the time, but let's say it said 8:42. And all of a sudden, we're just driving. All of a sudden, he goes, 8 divided by 4 equals 2, 100%. And I looked at him and I was like, what? And he goes, I made an equation out of the clock. And I was like, that's interesting. Because that is not something I would have done. And then he goes, now you do one. And I said, no, you already did it. He goes, no, do one. There's another one. You can always make another one. And I was like, what is he doing? And I found it very charming, even though never, ever in a million years would I have done that. And because I did not identify as a math person at all. So this would have been in college. And like I was actually in anticipating this conversation, I was kind of thinking about some things, and I can remember in 1992 flipping through the U.S. News and World Report, like colleges, magazine that we would get, or I don't know, I got it. Yeah, and I was looking at the colleges and universities that I was thinking about applying to try to find out, like, do I have to take math my senior year? Because I didn't want to take it. I did not like it. It was not resonating with me. And actually, my junior year math teacher was great. I really liked him, Mr. Woodbury, really, really good, neat guy. But it just didn't click with me. Um, so and when I found out, like, gosh, all these places, I only need 3 years of math. It was like the best news ever. So the fact I'm driving down the road with this guy who I really like, who's making, number sentences out of the clock, was really pretty funny. And over the course of many years, he would do things like that, but I wouldn't really think about it. And like as a teacher, you know, I taught third grade my first year of teaching, and I had no idea what I was doing. I taught how I was taught. I had, a math prep class in college, but it wasn't very good. It was taught by an adjunct who came in and like basically did her middle school math class with us. And I really didn't know what I was doing, like for real. And to the point that one day I brought home base 10 blocks and I sat them on the dining room table, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I can use these to teach subtraction, but I have no idea how. And Ryan was like, okay, well, let's play. And like, it was just it's such an interesting thought in my head to know that at one point, like I really had no idea how to teach this subject, but I knew I had to get better at it. I knew I had to like work to connect with it. So I moved from third grade to first grade. I had the opportunity to get trained in Math Their Way. And that was huge. That was a huge training and turning point for me, where I really in that training, I found out what number meant, like that number wasn't numerals. Like I learned the difference between those. And I went into my teaching first grade just ready, and they called it tubbing, and we would tub like at least 3 days a week. And my kids knew their facts. They knew their patterns. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So I did that for 2 years before I moved. And ultimately I got a job when I was in grad school in New York. I wasn't teaching math. I got like a humanities job in like 5th, 6th grade. And so then when I moved to Wisconsin, I was teaching math again, and we were given a series, Everyday Math, and we had really good training. Not everyone gets really good training when they adopt a new textbook series, but we had really good training. And I remember I can remember sitting in like the library space, and the woman just telling us, like, start from the beginning and just teach the lessons, just go, like, you don't have to do anything. And I was like, that's great news. I don't have to do anything. And so I did that, and it didn't work, like literally at all. And my husband was getting his PhD at the University of Wisconsin, where Tom Carpenter had done all of his initial work with CGI and everything. And so he was out in the schools, he was learning, and he said, well, try, like, let's like try this, or let me teach you this thing, or let me show you this. And I was like kind of annoyed. And in retrospect, I joke that I said to him, nobody likes you. Like nobody likes
you're saying this to your husband?
Yeah, I was like, nobody likes the guy that goes into the schools and tells everybody what they're supposed to be doing.
Yes, right.
And he was like, okay, but if he got offended, he never showed it, because I know probably in the back of his mind, he was like, you should just try it. Like, just you wait. And so I did. And it always worked. Like I would finish teaching a lesson and I would look out at the sea of faces of like nothing was resonating. So then I'm like, I'm going to try this thing that Ryan taught me. And things just always started clicking. with the kids and with me. And so I started relearning math while I was basically learning how to teach math. And
this was third grade?
So at this point I was teaching like fourth and fifth grade.
Fourth and fifth grade. Okay, great.
And I was in my 8th year of teaching. So, and I got to the point where I would come home and I'd be like, tell me more, like, tell me more stuff. And, I got the original, children's mathematics book. I read it, like the dark blue one, the first edition. I read it cover to cover. I watched the, CD-ROMs that was,
my gosh, right.
And I was so intrigued. Like we ask kids questions in math, like we find out what they're thinking about.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know we did that. And so when I started doing that, it was teaching me so much. And I was absolutely fascinated by how kids thought about math, mostly because I never had. And so, so, I mean, that's kind of like a long answer to your question, but like, I have wondered a lot over time, like what would have happened if I hadn't had that kind of critical friend right at my side. I would have just been following everyday math and blaming the kids probably and their families for them not knowing the math. Which, he was able to point out to me, like, if they're struggling in math class, that's not their fault. Like you have to change something that you're doing. And so I've often wondered how do we make sure that people have those kinds of people in their lives that can ask those questions and be that kind of critical friend? Because that's what made me just get better and better and better at my craft. But, so ultimately I became an assistant principal. I was an instructional coach. I did kind of all the things, and people were always asking for math help, and it was great. It was fun working with them and kept learning alongside them. And, and then ultimately I decided to go get my PhD, and I actually went in, my master's work is all in educational leadership and policy. And, I went in to my PhD work in the same thing. But I was still out in schools doing all this math work. And I kind of had a moment one day where I was like, I feel like there's probably some stuff I don't know. And so I added on that major. I added on the math ed major. So, awesome. And I'm really, 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 really glad I did, because I learned so much in taking those courses and doing that work. So, so that's kind of the gist of it. But I'm definitely someone, like I joke that if my algebra teacher from high school could see me now, because I really think I was one of those kids that he would just like shake his head at and be like, I've got nothing left for you. And I think a lot of the time it was because like I had questions, I had wonderings. I wanted to know why something worked. I wanted to know why I was doing that particular step or procedure. And we weren't allowed to know. We were just supposed to do it. So, I love that. I joke that I wish I had it on like film or like journals or like something, so that it doesn't sound like a made up story. Because it feels so. But then I've learned over time, a lot of people that do similar work to what we do have similar stories. So
that's a perfect segue into where I was going to go next, because since this is a podcast swap, like, first of all, I just have to say thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah, sure.
But I'm finding at every conversation I have had, with the exception of maybe 2 that I can think of off the top of my head, every single person who comes onto this podcast has a story where there's some moment of like needing that critical friend. I love that term. I don't know if you made that up, but I think that's I think critical friend is like, that's like a term we should lean on. Like you need that critical friend who's going to be not just placate you and be like, oh yeah, the kids are awful, right? That's not a critical friend. A critical friend, from how I'm interpreting what your definition, I don't know what your definition is, but like my interpretation is that person who allows you to take a critical look at what you're doing, and then helps you get to where you kind of like need to start to grow. And I just think that's so important. And I feel like more teachers need that critical friend.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite stories to tell, I actually do not like telling this story at all, and it actually took me years and years and years to get the courage to do it, is, and so I used to say, like, I just recently started telling this story, but it's probably been maybe 4 or 5 6 years now, where I was doing division. I was teaching division, and I can't remember if it was 4th or 5th grade because I went back and forth between those 2 grade levels when I was in Wisconsin, and I kept a lot of the same kids. We only had 2 classes full, and I taught all the math. So I had a student in my class who, she had a label. She had an OHI label, like other handicap impaired, I think is what that meant then. And so, I would sit in her, case conferences and all the things. And I never really understood like what is, I will call her, Sally. What is Sally's, like, what does she need? And I could never really get answers. And, she was really struggling in math class, and we were doing division, and I was at home and I was talking to Ryan about it. And I was like, she's not getting it. I don't know what to do. Like amount of stuff. And I said, she just needs to know the traditional algorithm. Like she just needs to know the traditional US algorithm. And oh my gosh, it's still so hard to say this out loud. I said, and I get emotional every time. So I was thought maybe I wouldn't if I told this story, but I said, it'll be a miracle if she even graduates from high school. She just needs to know the steps to solve the problem. And Ryan looked at me and he said, I'm going to go ahead and let you think about what you just said about your student. And he just walked away.
That is a critical friend right there. And I just got the chills all the way through this line from Indiana.
And I really needed that because I was blaming everything but me. And it's not about blame. It's just about taking the time to recognize like, what's the issue and how can I help this child? And like, what can the child do? Like, why am I focusing so much on what she can't do and making all these like assumptions and decisions about her? Like, he was so right. Like he could have been so mean. There's so many in retrospect, there's so many things he could have done to really put me in my place. But I went to school the next day and I pulled her aside and I had out Unifix cubes and paper and a pen. And I was like, okay, I just want to do like a little bit of work with you. I'm like, I go, so tell me like, what's 15 divided by 3? And she just looked at me and I said, you can use these cubes, you can use paper, whatever you want to do. And so she picked up the pen and on paper, she wrote 15 and then she put like the box over it, like the traditional US algorithm. And then she put 3. So she put everything in the right place. And then she put her pen up to her chin and she goes, And I thought to myself, okay, like this is telling me some things. So I said, what if and I gave her like a story problem. Like, what if I had 15 pencils and I wanted to split them into 3 containers? Like how many is going to go into each container? And she goes, 15 divided by 3. And I said, yeah, well, what is that? Like, what am I doing when I say 15 divided by 3? And she didn't know. She didn't know. She didn't know. So in that moment, I was like, grab 15 cubes and let's pretend that they're pencils. So I go through the whole thing with her. And, when I was done and she walked away, I thought to myself, I wanted to teach her the traditional US algorithm. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And so that was a big, big, big moment for me where I really learned, like, we need to find out what the kids know and we need to build off their strengths. And I've heard Peter Lillydahl say, back the train up. Like, we got to back the train up so they can all get on and then move them forward from there. And I'm in so many classrooms and I see so many situations where I feel like teachers are having that sort of moment of desperateness, like, oh my gosh, I have to teach them how to do this and get the right answer. And they're teaching them, tips and tricks and algorithms that the kids are not ready for. And when I, walk in and kind of back the train way far up to see, so I can show the teachers what the kids can do, and in their minds, they're like, yeah, but all you did was like a 2-digit divided by a 1-digit. I'm like, yeah, but what we saw was that every single person in this room has a way to figure that out. So build off of that. Like giving them, a trick to get to the next moment is not isn't helping them. And we think we're helping them, but we're not. So, so that was an absolutely, I mean, there's a handful of like huge tipping point moment stories for me. And that is definitely one of them that I kept quiet for a really long time because it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing to know that I was saying that and thinking that about a kid. Like, who am I? And so, and it was also in that moment that I realized like them not knowing something is my problem. It's not their problem. It's not their parents' problem. It's not the textbook's problem. That is my problem. And that there's a lot of vulnerability there. So
yeah,
yeah,
because it's so personal. It's so
it's,
deeply personal. And I think
yeah,
sometimes we strip away the personal piece of being a teacher. We talk a lot about teachers getting depleted and teachers, and I'm not saying that none of that is true. Of course, it's a very exhausting time right now in our world to teach. But I think, Courtney, what you're talking about is the critical aspect of the teacher. And, for years, publishing companies have been trying to create these teacher proof books, which you kind of like are alluding to in your earlier story. But at the end of the day, what are we doing to support the teacher
yep,
and how the teacher sees their students?
yep,
And I had a similar, and I love how you're like, I get emotional when I tell this story because you look back and you're like, what was I thinking? And
yeah,
thank God you had Ryan to be like,
yep,
or thank goodness you had Ryan to, kind of set you straight. And the way he set you straight, like, wasn't just like, here, let me show you. He actually like gave you the time to think, which is so powerful. And I feel like, yeah. So I said a similar thing about students. Same idea. I was teaching in an underserved school that had test scores that were actually, when I was hired. So I had also had 8 years of teaching behind me. Ironically, I had taught everyday math for 5 of those years.
it's great.
But I, unlike you, did not get the advantage of the
Yeah,
training because I came in after it had already been enrolled in. But the parents in that district were still up in arms about this new way of teaching math. I was teaching 6th grade at the time, and they
sure.
all thought their kids had to go to Harvard. And if they had
Yeah,
this spiral curriculum, how the heck were they ever going to get to Harvard? Because they weren't memorizing stuff and whatever. So I had that experience behind me. Then I come to this, and then before that, I worked in another school, but that's another story for another day. But I came to this school because I was like, okay, it was closer geographically to my house. That was number one. But I said to myself, if I was at a moment in my life where I didn't have kids yet, and I was like, okay, I'm going to work in this situation where these kids are, the scores were in the dumper, and I did not realize at the time that part of my hiring was part of like the district's, I think, like initiative to kind of clean house and like start fresh. I was new administration, all the things. So I walk in the first day, like fully expecting to be like, this is going to be amazing. These kids are going to like love this math class. And it was quite the opposite.
yeah,
And I was teaching 8th grade. So the behaviors were like off the cuff. I mean, I'm 5'1", and they were like towering over me on day one. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was one. Also, they had never been asked to think. And all of my colleagues, after I met the kids on the first day, were like, don't worry, Pam, it'll get better. Next year's group is better. They would say, this is the worst group to come through this school.
it's always the group.
It's the group. And I'm like, but there's what? So, of course, I was trying to do the right thing. I was non-tenured now, right? I had already been tenured in another district, but that doesn't carry with you in New Jersey. So the art teacher came to me in the cornered me in the hallway one day, super lovely woman, and said, you could be teaching anywhere. Why are you teaching here? Why did you choose to teach here? And I'm like, what? So all these messages are coming from my colleagues, and I'm thinking, I've made a mistake. I've made a big mistake. So I called back the other districts who had offered me a job and asked them, this was like 2 weeks into school, if they had those positions open. One district said no, it had been filled. The other district said, sure, you can come teach science on a cart.
Oh,
Like, I'm not teaching science. I'm not going to be like Bill Nye the Science Guy. Like, no. So I was like, forget that. At the same time, I was in grad school and I was taking a class at Rutgers. And Title of the class was Intro to Math Education, which is kind of funny because I had been teaching math, right? So I thought I knew all the things.
Of course.
I knew all the things. And the professor started bringing in these at the time, like, I don't even know if it was like right around the time that Joe Bowler stuff was starting to really come out. And she was bringing in these low floor, high ceiling tasks. So a lot of the same types of tasks that Joe brings in, where it's like, the pattern is growing. How do you see the pattern growing? Those types of tasks. Meanwhile, my daily reality was that these kids were like heads on the desks, hoods up. One kid was like bringing a suitcase to class with her. I'm like, what is in the suitcase? I mean, it was mayhem in my classroom. And the reason why it was mayhem is because these kids didn't know any different, right? And I didn't know how to maintain control. At the same time, I had been handed this stack of I call the shiny red textbooks because they were beautiful, right? I opened them up and brand new, nice books. I open it up and it's like, have you ever seen Dan Meyer's TED Talk where he talks about, it's like a sitcom, right? So it's like, it's a traditional textbook. So I would be like, okay, open to page 14. Meanwhile, my soul was dying inside because I'm like, this is not how I teach math. This is not how I want to teach math. But there were new books, fresh start. This school wanted everything to be new. So I was like, all right, I'll teach out of these textbooks. Then I would go to grad school at night and my professor was like, you have to do these low floor, high ceiling tasks. And I'm like, I can't. There's no way. So after class one night, I stayed with her and I said, I don't think these kids can do what you're asking me to do. And I don't even know if I'm cut out for teaching. Like, I can't. I'm like, maybe my last 8 years was just like an anomaly and maybe I just got lucky. But these kids, I don't think they can. And she was like, I'll never forget. She said, if you don't believe in these kids, who will?
Yeah.
She said, they already have a whole school that is looking at them like the misfits and like the ones the screw ups. And she's like, and trust me, there were some kids in that class who like had some serious trauma and from lots of things that go on in their lives, but that doesn't stop them from being able to do math.
Right.
So I took the textbooks away the next day. I set up a clothesline in my room and I brought out the clips. Actually, I just talked to Kristen Acosta a couple weeks ago and I brought out but this is before I knew her or anything. I brought the, I don't know what made me do this, clothespins, and we did fractions. We ordered fractions and I literally, Courtney, started with where does 1/2 go? Where does 3/4 go? Right. And then I would give them more fractions and more fractions. So I started teaching this way in the spirit of how I believed math should be taught, by asking them questions, by inquiry, all the things. And meanwhile, reminding that backing up the train, I wasn't just backing up the train on their skills and their cognitive understanding of math. I was backing up the train on their beliefs about whether or not they could do it.
Yep.
So one day I'm walking down to the main office to check my mailbox and I see all my students in the main office. And I'm like, huh. And that wasn't all of them. I had like 82 kids that year. And so but it was a large portion of them. And they were jammed into the glassed in main office vestibule area. And the principal is on the other side of the desk and at the reception area. And he looks over their heads and he says, oh, here's Mrs. Brett right now. Why don't you guys tell her what you just told me? You know what they said? They said, you don't know how to do the math because every time we give you an answer, you ask us another question. So they were telling the principal, because they would say to me, why don't you check the answer key? You have an answer key, lady. Why don't you check the answer key? I'm like, I don't want to check the answer key. I want you to tell me why you think the answer is 5/8. And they were so angry. And so the principal, thank God, I just told this talk in a group of, with a group of instructional leaders. And I said, that principal had my back.
Yeah.
But he also had the kids' backs because what he told them by supporting me was that he said, Mrs. Brett is doing exactly what we hired her to do. She's giving you an opportunity to think and use your brains. And they were like, but we don't want to use our brains. He's like, too bad. Go enjoy your lunch. It was lunchtime. So he's like, go back to the cafeteria.
We don't want to.
But really, I mean, in that moment, I'm sure I went home and cried that day. And this was a long time ago. And you talk about, these stories that like kind of define us. I mean, that is definitely a story that defined the trajectory of my career, because after that, I'm like, all right, he ripped off the Band-Aid for me and was like, just do it. Just go for it. And what's the worst that can happen? And at the same time, I had been told, like, in that same kind of like couple of weeks, it was like a whirlwind. I don't know what happened first or what happened next, but I had been told that if we didn't raise test scores 19% that year, that the state was coming over. The state was coming in and taking over the school. And I was the only 8th grade math teacher. I had a co-teacher, but she admittedly was like taking my class along with the students. Lovely, amazing. I'm still friends with her to this day, but she was like, I don't know how to do any of this math because she hadn't been given the training either. So it was really up to me and those kids to make it happen. And of course we did. Did we get through the whole curriculum? Absolutely not. But we've still raised test scores
Yeah.
and it wasn't, to me, it wasn't about the test scores because whatever. That was at the beginning of quarterly assessments. So they were bringing in the quarterly assessments. It was taking so much instructional time. I'm like, dude, I would have been able to raise those test scores. We would have been able to raise those test scores so much more had I not needed to take 16 days out of my instructional year to administer tests and grade them. And all they had actually hired a temp to come in and help me grade the tests because I was like, I can't. You want there was no computer. It wasn't computerized like it is now. It was all on paper and pencil. But I tell all these stories. I tell that story because there's so many moments like that are parallel to your story about moments where I'm like, maybe this is impossible.
Yeah.
Like maybe there is such a thing as a math person and not a math person. Like maybe because these kids come from a certain neighborhood or something. I'm like, what was I thinking?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I think that there is a massive estimation in understanding the importance of what we believe, like how we think about math and how we think about how kids can do math. And I think a lot of the times we encounter teachers who like they don't connect with math, they don't identify as a math person, or they don't, they never really liked it at the elementary level. Like I have to teach it because I'm an elementary teacher and I teach all the content areas. And then you have like secondary teachers who they're teaching it because like math worked for them, like the way it was taught worked, and so it should work for everyone. Like there's such an interesting difference in that, but there's so many pieces of belief in there about how we think about math and how we think about kids doing math, and the fact that people think about attacking problems in so many different ways from so many different directions. And if we give them the opportunity to do that, then they will, and like, I always go back to about twice a year, I read Gloria Latson-Billings, but that's just good teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a quick, easy read. And it's a good reminder of like, why are we doing this? And how do we make math connect for kids? And the first tenet is academic success, and just believing that all children can do math and we hold them to high standards no matter what. And they can. And I mean, I have story after story after story like yours in my own classrooms of kids that never would have thought they could talk about what they were doing, or didn't know that you talked in math class, or I mean, so many stories like that. And when they start believing in themselves, or seeing themselves as, oh wow, I can do math, I am someone that does math, the difference is absolutely enormous. And we don't spend enough time on that piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need to know the content. Yeah, we need to know the pedagogy. Yeah, we need to know like how to bring those things together to create a classroom environment. But the culture of mathematics in our classroom and the culture of mathematics in our schools cannot be overlooked. No. And it really is. And I've not been to every school everywhere, so I cannot speak in absolutes in that way. But I walk through a lot of buildings that have posters of teachers, with holding their favorite book. And I'm always like, where are the posters of them talking about their favorite number? Mm-hmm. Or talking about, mathematizing the world around them in some way. Like, why don't we have those posters? Like, why not have them right next to each other? And it's like tiny, and that's just like a tiny little step that we take, and I always encourage people, like, just do math, like just sit down and just do a problem together, and I know they want to look at me and be like, I don't have time for that nonsense, but I'm like, it makes every difference. Take 5 minutes to solve this problem together. and think about and grapple together, and it's really interesting. Once they start doing that, they start to see those, they start to make those connections too. But like, you have to start somewhere, you know? And you're right. It's a hard time. There's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot of expectations on teachers. I can't speak to that. I'm not I don't have my own classroom right now. I don't work in a school right now. And I acknowledge that. I see it, but not but a little bit of but.
Yeah, no, I get you.
In the end, like, is what you're doing working? And if it's not, you try something different. And it's scary and hard, and it might flop, but so that's what happens when you try new things. Like, a lot of times it doesn't work. So make some shifts, and change it up. And, the you're going to get there, and so will your kids, but your kids aren't going to get there if you struggled one day and then the next day you're like, I'm just going to give them the steps to solve the problem, because I just need them to get the right answer. If they need to get the right answer, and I mean, in the world we're living in now, and one of the reasons why we have to think about teaching math differently, they have calculators in their pockets.
Yeah.
Yep. They have AI that can answer all kinds of questions for them, and we can't deny that exists. So, like, why are we teaching math? It's not just about right answers. Yes, right answers are very important, but it's so much deeper than that now. So, I mean, it always was, but now it's like blatantly obvious how different it is. And so there's just a lot of tiny little steps that have to be taken. And, just like, I'm just going to get on a clothespin. I'm going to see how this works, or I'm just going to grab the cubes and be like, do you even know what 15 divided by 3 means? Like, what am I doing to this child by trying to teach him something that they don't even know what division means? And, you have to pause and ask yourself those questions. And those are really hard questions. And you have to be willing to hear an answer or come across an answer that makes you uncomfortable. And that's when you are going to do great things. So, but it is really hard.
Yeah. And I think acknowledging that uncomfortable, like for me, when I was teaching those kids, like on the days where I said, all right, open your book to page 14, they weren't happy about it. But in the beginning, they were like, finally, she's just going to tell us what to do.
Yeah.
And they actually would, like, the room would settle a little bit. And I was like, okay, nobody's like jumping up over desks. There's nothing flying in my face. Like, I mean, they weren't really throwing things at me, but it was, it was very hard to get their attention. But then when I would be like, okay, guys, I'm just going to teach you how to do this, they'd be like, oh, thank goodness she's doing what she's supposed to be doing. Cause they had this belief about what my job was. They believed that my job was to like insert the information into their brains, and their job was to regurgitate, because that's all they had experienced before. And I was lucky that I had some previous experience of what it felt like to teach kids from more of a CGI kind of methodology. And but that was emotionally uncomfortable for them. And I can't imagine had I not had that experience.
Yeah.
Of, okay, I know what it feels like to develop mathematical understanding.
Yeah.
I know how to do that as a teacher. And now I just need to get these kids to like trust me, right? That I had their back. And I mean, it took months, right? It took months for them to start to get on board, because I felt like I always use the metaphor of a jar, right? So I get a ball jar. It's my favorite.
Yeah,
thing.
Me
so, like,
too.
their jar was like filled to the brim with like muck, right? And so I couldn't pour all that out, but what I could do is like replace the muck with more. But it had to happen every single day. It was like this daily drip and then eventually by the end of the year, most of their jar was clear. I'm not going to say it was completely clear. But I had to get through a lot of days where I was just going to hold the line on these kids and be like, nope. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you how to do this. I mean, it's not that I didn't tell them how to do anything, but it was like, I want to hear what you have to say, and I'm going to listen.
Yeah. Well, here's what's interesting. Your ball jar is a 64-ounce ball jar. Theirs is only 32. So the muck that you're replacing while you're going through that process and believing like, I can replace the muck, I can give them the skills that they need. I can show them how, yeah, I'm going to do some very explicit teaching to you right now, but it's going to connect to all this other thinking that you've done. There's a lot of muck replacing. I love this metaphor that we have to do as teachers. That is so that is significantly harder. And like that, that's the work that I primarily do with teachers, where it's not like old dog new tricks thing. It's like we have lived a certain way of thinking and believing a certain thing about mathematics and the teaching of mathematics for so long. And that's a huge shift that is going to take a lot of time. And it drives me nuts when these like companies come in and they're like, just use this curriculum, use this thing. Indiana has a law that's passing. People have to turn in these tier 2 and tier 3 intervention plans. I'm getting gobs of phone calls about it. Number one question is, what should we buy? And I'm like, I have suggestions for that. Like I have thoughts around that for sure. I'm very careful about how I share that because, I don't, nobody wants to feel left out, all the things. But, I'm always like, no intervention material is going to work if your teachers don't believe the kids can do the math and don't believe that they can teach it, aren't making the connections.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so, and like, not everybody wants to hear that. Like they want the thing because we live in a system where it's the thing is going to solve all the problems. And kind of in reality, like the thing is what got us here. So we have like massive muck replacing that we're doing.
Massive muck replacing.
The whole ponds of muck we're replacing.
It's an MMR. Maybe we can I can make an acronym out of that. Because I know people love acronyms.
Yeah, they do.
And labels, acronyms and labels. So I'm like, how about we just deal with the human being that's sitting in front of us?
Seriously.
Like, come on.
Yeah, no, I love that though. Like that, the humanity of it. Like we just like and it's okay. It's okay, but it's really hard. I work with a team. My team at Keep Indiana Learning is like incredible. The specialists that I work with, they're so good at what they do, and they want it all to go very well all the time. And we've been doing some new things, and I was sitting right in this very spot having a meeting with them. I was like, you guys, like this isn't going to be perfect the first time we do it. I go, that would be awesome, but it's probably not going to be. I go, I am very comfortable with that. I go, and if you're not, that's okay, but like, accept the fact that it's not going to go well the first time, and we're going to keep getting better at it. So this is everywhere, and we just have to we have to debunk that, and that's a lot of work, but we can. We just have to keep persevering.
I love it. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you all day.
I know.
It is the day before Thanksgiving, though, so at some point we have to go do turkey stuff.
You gotta go roast your turkey.
I gotta roast my turkey. But okay, so I wrap up every episode with this question because I think it's a perfect way to end based on what you were just saying. So the question is, what gives you hope? What gives you hope in the math education space?
Yeah, I sort of knew you were going to ask this. And it's funny, somebody else asked me that recently on a different podcast. So, and I don't think it was you all should talk, but I think what gives me hope is that everywhere I go, people are starting to like, things are starting to click. That when somebody tries something, they're in that same place that I was in 2004 when I was like, I'm just going to try this because what I'm doing is not working. They're starting to do it and they see it working, and then they get excited to know more. And that's what gives me hope, because I think it's that excitement and that curiosity. I asked Liesl McConchie recently, like, what happened to my brain when I was going through that change? And she was like, curiosity. Like curiosity was impacting your process of learning. And I think that we're working really hard, like podcasts like yours and things that are out there are helping teachers ask more questions and have that curiosity and want to be better at it. And I think that's what's giving me hope. I just had a teacher last week that said, I had been with them like the week or two before, and we were talking about some stuff, and she goes, well, I went back and I did it. She goes, oh my gosh, engagement in my room has never been that high before, ever. And then she said, I felt like I was working less and the kids were working more. And I was like, yes, because when you walk into a classroom, who should be doing the work?
Yes.
And I heard that from someone. I can't remember who it is right now. It's not me, but that sits very prevalently in my brain on like, when you walk into a classroom, who's doing the work?
Yes.
And when that teacher said I was doing less, and we were all learning, I was like, yes, that's it.
Jinx.
And
That's
it.
it.
And it's not, you weren't not teaching. There's a really huge misunderstanding of what that means. That's not what was going on. You letting them work and think and facilitating that learning is so powerful, and so that's what gives me hope, is recognizing the need for baby steps and seeing them.
Thank you so much for that. So much more I could say, but I think we should wrap up. I do think, there was one question I had for you, but it's going to be too late to ask you this question. You mentioned something called tubbing. What's tubbing?
So tubbing was a math their way. I get everyday math and math their way mixed up. I shouldn't, because it's very different. But
yes.
Math their way, they called it tubbing, and you put all the materials. So like there was a tub of Unifix cubes and a tub of 1-inch tiles and a tub of 2-sided beans, and the kids all had like a number that they were working on. And so they might like grab the beans and do like spill and record, and then they, colored in and they wrote their equation that went along with it. And tubbing was basically just number work and developing fluency, and Math Their Way called it tubbing.
I love it. I'm like, I got to use that. That's really fun. That's really fun. I think at the end of the day, we're both doing really important work, and thank you so much for everything that you're doing. And I think, and Ryan, thank him, because he was really like part of this conversation, even though he wasn't physically here. I'd like to chat with him someday for sure too.
Should.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think the work that we're all doing, it's like almost like just getting the web to expand, right? Like, I feel like, especially after October, the NCTM and CSM conferences, and then I was just at a couple of other conferences, and I'm like, sometimes it's an echo chamber, right? And it's like, the more we can get out in the states where teachers maybe can't get to those national conferences, the more people start. And I had a similar experience where a teacher came up to me at the end of my talk on last Friday and said, actually, she texted me afterwards. She said, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this on Monday. I haven't circled back to her to see if she's tried it, but
we should.
It was number strings. I was showing her basically the Pam Harris stuff, and she was like, "Oh, this is right."
Yeah, it's those aha moments where they sit there and they're like, "Are you kidding me right now?" Like, and I had those moments.
Yeah,
and that's what we have to capitalize on, because I'm sure. I mean, I can't speak for you, but I have moments where I'm like, I can't do it anymore. Like, I joke, I'm going to be on my deathbed being like, time tests don't work. Like, I don't care who said it. It's just, they don't work for everyone. Just one more minute before I die. Just everyone remember I said that, because I've been having that same conversation for so many years.
Yes.
And sometimes I'm like, I'm done now. Like I'm done, and then I bounce back, but that teachers are in that same boat too. Like 100%. We're educators, and educating is hard work.
It's hard work. It is hard work. It is. Well, thank you for everything you do, Courtney.
Thank you.
So fun on this. It was so fun to have this sort of like pod swap.
Yes, I love it. I can't wait.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, and have a happy Thanksgiving, Courtney.
Thank you. You too.
I'm Pam Brett. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Blue Glasses Math. Please follow me wherever you get your podcasts, and follow along on the conversation on Instagram. And remember, being a math person is all just a matter of perspective.